It was the perfect autumn evening, and the air was crisp with the promise of adventure. The annual harvest carnival had come to town, bringing with it a sprawling maze of cornfields, rickety rides, and brightly lit booths. The sounds of laughter and the sweet scent of cotton candy filled the air as a group of friends made their way through the bustling crowd. Sarah, the adventurous one, led the way, her auburn hair bouncing with each step. Close behind her were Emily, who clung to her boyfriend Mark, and Jason, the joker of the group, who was constantly looking for ways to spook his friends. Rounding out the group was Mia, quieter and more reserved, but excited for the night ahead. "Let's hit the corn maze," Sarah suggested with a grin, her eyes sparkling with excitement. "Are you sure? That thing looks huge," Emily said, glancing nervously at the towering stalks of corn that swayed in the evening breeze. "Come on, it'll be fun. We'll stick together," Sarah reassured her. The group entered the maze, their laughter and chatter echoing through the narrow paths. The cornfield was a labyrinth of twists and turns, and it wasn't long before they were hopelessly lost. The excitement of the maze soon turned to unease as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows that seemed to move on their own. "Guys, I think we should head back," Mia said, her voice tinged with worry. "Don't be a chicken," Jason teased, but even he couldn't hide the nervous edge in his voice. Suddenly, Sarah darted ahead. "I'll find the way out. Wait here. I'll be right back," she called over her shoulder. "Sarah, wait," Mark shouted, but she was already out of sight. Minutes ticked by, turning into an hour, and still there was no sign of Sarah. The group's nervous jokes had ceased, replaced by anxious whispers and the rustling of the corn around them. "We need to find her," Emily said, her voice shaking. They started down the path Sarah had taken, calling her name, but the only response was the eerie rustling of the corn. Just as panic began to set in, they stumbled upon a clearing. There, illuminated by the faint moonlight, was Sarah. She was lying in the middle of the clearing, her eyes wide open, staring at the starless sky. Her throat was slashed, and blood soaked the ground around her. Emily screamed, collapsing into Mark's arms, while Jason and Mia stood frozen in horror. Who could have done this?" Jason whispered, his voice barely audible. "We need to get out of here," Mark said, pulling Emily to her feet. "Now." As they turned to leave, a figure stepped out from the corn, blocking their path. The man was tall, dressed in dark, tattered clothes, and his eyes gleamed with a malevolent light. "Leaving so soon?" he asked, his voice a low growl. The friends backed away, their hearts pounding. The man's smile widened as he raised a blood-stained knife, its blade glinting in the moonlight. "You shouldn't have come here," he said, advancing slowly. "Run!" Mark shouted, pushing Emily and Mia ahead of him. They bolted through the maze, the man's laughter echoing behind them. The corn seemed to close in around them, the paths twisting and turning, always leading them back to the clearing. Panic surged through them as they realized they were trapped. "There's no way out," Mia sobbed, clutching Jason's arm. "We have to keep moving," Jason said, his voice trembling. Just when it seemed all hope was lost, they burst through the corn and stumbled onto the carnival grounds. The bright lights and cheerful sounds of the carnival were a stark contrast to the terror they had just escaped. They looked back, but the man was gone. Panting and terrified, they ran to the nearest booth and frantically told the carnival workers what had happened. The police were called, and the maze was searched, but the killer was never found. The carnival closed early that night, and the friends were left with a haunting memory that would never fade. As they left the carnival grounds, they could still hear the faint, mocking laughter carried on the wind, a chilling reminder of the horror hidden within the corn. It was a cool, breezy evening in late October, and Universal Studios was alive with the excitement of Halloween horror nights. The park was transformed into a macabre wonderland, with haunted houses, scare zones, and costumed actors ready to terrify the guests. Among the throngs of thrill-seekers was a group of friends, Laura, Nick, Jessica, and Mike, eager to experience the scares. Laura, the horror movie buff, led the group with a map in hand. "Let's hit the back lot first," she suggested, pointing to an area known for its intense scare zones. The friends agreed and made their way through the park, their anticipation growing with each step. The backlot was shrouded in fog, the set pieces of abandoned streets and eerie buildings creating an atmosphere of palpable dread. Actors dressed as zombies and ghouls leaped out from hidden corners, eliciting screams and laughter from the group. "This is awesome!" Mike shouted, his excitement barely contained. As they ventured deeper into the backlot, they found themselves in a quieter section, away from the crowds and the well-lit paths. The buildings here were more dilapidated, the air heavier with the scent of decay. "Are we supposed to be here?" Jessica asked, her voice tinged with unease. "Yeah, it's all part of the experience," Laura replied confidently. "The map says this area is called the Forgotten Set." They pressed on, but the eerie silence and the unsettling atmosphere began to weigh on them. The usual jump scares and actors were absent, replaced by an oppressive stillness. Just as they were about to turn back, they heard a faint, melodic singing echoing through the alleyways. "Do you hear that?" Nick asked, his brow furrowing. "Yeah, it's coming from over there," Laura said, pointing to a narrow alley between two crumbling facades. Curiosity piqued, they followed the sound, which grew louder and more haunting with each step. The alley led to a small courtyard, where a single figure stood under a flickering street lamp. It was a woman in a vintage dress, her face hidden by a veil, singing a mournful tune. "Is she part of the attraction?" Mike wondered aloud. As they approached, the woman stopped singing and slowly lifted her veil, revealing a gaunt, pale face with hollow eyes. Her lips twisted into a sinister smile, and she began to whisper in a language none of them understood. The temperature seemed to drop, and a sense of dread washed over the friends. "Guys, I don't like this," Jessica said, her voice trembling. "Let's go." But before they could move, the woman's whispers grew louder, and she extended a bony hand towards them. Shadows began to writhe and twist around her, forming grotesque shapes that crawled across the ground and walls. "Run!" Nick shouted, grabbing Jessica's hand. They sprinted back the way they came, the shadows chasing them, twisting into monstrous forms that reached out with clawed hands. The once familiar paths now seemed like a labyrinth, the exits obscured by darkness and fog. Their breaths came in ragged gasps as they desperately tried to find their way out. "Over here!" Laura yelled, spotting a faintly lit exit sign in the distance. They burst through the door, back into the bustling park. The sounds of laughter and screams of delight were a stark contrast to the terror they had just experienced. They huddled together, catching their breath and glancing nervously around. "What the hell was that?" Mike panted, his face pale. "I don't know, but we need to tell someone," Laura said, her eyes wide with fear. They approached a park employee, breathlessly recounting their encounter. The employee listened, a frown creasing his forehead. "There's no attraction called the Forgotten Set, and we don't have anyone in a vintage dress tonight." he said, his voice tinged with concern. The friends exchanged bewildered glances, the reality of their experience sinking in. As they left the park, they couldn't shake the feeling that something had followed them, a shadow lurking just out of sight. The haunting melody of the woman's song echoed in their minds, a chilling reminder that some horrors are all too real, even in the heart of a theme park. The small town of Brimfield buzzed with excitement as the annual spring carnival rolled into town. Brightly colored tents, flashing lights, and the tantalizing aroma of fried food filled the air. Friends and families flocked to the fairgrounds, eager to enjoy the festivities. Among them were 5 friends: Sarah, Jake, Melissa, Tom, and Lily, ready for a night of fun and adventure. "This is going to be awesome," Jake exclaimed, pointing to the towering Ferris wheel that loomed over the carnival. "Yeah, let's hit all the rides," Tom agreed, his eyes shining with excitement. The group made their way through the carnival, their laughter blending with the sounds of delighted screams and cheerful music. They started with the merry-go-round, moved on to the bumper cars, and then decided to try the more thrilling rides. "Let's go on the tilt-a-whirl," Sarah suggested, leading the way. They climbed into the spinning ride, laughing as they were tossed and turned. But as the ride picked up speed, a strange grinding noise echoed through the air. The friends exchanged nervous glances as the ride began to spin faster and faster, beyond its normal speed. "What's happening?" Lily shouted, gripping the safety bar tightly. The grinding noise grew louder, and with a sudden jolt, the ride stopped, throwing the friends against the sides of their carriages. Dizzy and disoriented, they stumbled out, their hearts racing. "That was crazy," Melissa said, trying to steady herself. "Yeah, let's take a break," Sarah suggested, glancing back at the ride, which now stood eerily still. They wandered over to the Ferris wheel, hoping for a more relaxed experience. As they ascended, the view of the carnival below was breathtaking. But halfway up, the wheel groaned to a halt, leaving them suspended high above the ground. "Not again," Tom muttered, peering over the edge. Suddenly, the lights on the Ferris wheel flickered and went out, plunging them into darkness. Panic set in as the friends shouted for help, but their voices were swallowed by the night. The wheel began to shake violently, and the cars swayed precariously. "We need to get out of here," Jake yelled, trying to pry open the door of their car. Before they could react, the wheel jerked back to life, spinning rapidly in reverse. The friends clung to their seats, their screams mingling with the screeching of metal. With a final shudder, the wheel stopped again, this time at the bottom, and they scrambled out, their legs shaking. "Something's seriously wrong with these rides," Sarah said, her voice trembling. Determined to find answers, they headed to the carnival's control tent. Inside, they found a single operator, his face pale and drawn. "What's going on with the rides?" Jake demanded. "They're malfunctioning and nearly killed us." The operator looked up, his eyes hollow. "The carnival. It's cursed," he said in a whisper. "Cursed?" Melissa repeated, disbelief in her voice. "Years ago, there was an accident," the operator explained. "A young girl died on the Ferris wheel. Ever since then, strange things have happened. Rides malfunction, people get hurt. Some even disappear." The friends exchanged uneasy glances, the gravity of the situation sinking in. "We need to leave," Tom said firmly. "Now." As they turned to go, the tent's lights flickered, and a cold wind swept through the space. The friends hurried outside, only to find the carnival eerily deserted. The rides stood silent and still, the once vibrant lights now dim. "This is creepy," Lily whispered, her eyes darting around. Suddenly the merry-go-round sprang to life, its haunting tune filling the air. The friends froze, watching in horror as the horses began to move on their own, their eyes glowing an unnatural red. "Run!" Jake shouted, pulling Sarah along. They sprinted through the carnival, the rides around them coming to life in a chaotic, nightmarish dance. The roller coaster roared to life, its cars racing around the track with no passengers. The tilt-a-whirl spun wildly, the grinding noise louder than ever. They reached the exit, gasping for breath, only to find it blocked by a massive gate that hadn't been there before. "We're trapped," Melissa said, her voice shaking. Desperation set in as they looked for another way out. In the distance they saw the silhouette of the Ferris wheel, now bathed in a sinister glow. Standing at its base was the figure of a young girl, her eyes empty and cold. "It's her," Sarah whispered, "the girl who died." The ghostly figure raised a hand, and the rides around them fell silent. She stepped forward, her gaze fixed on the friends. "You shouldn't have come here," she said, her voice echoing with a chilling finality. The friends backed away, but the ground beneath them began to shake. The rides creaked and groaned, the air filled with the sound of breaking metal and splintering wood. With a final, deafening crash, the carnival collapsed into a twisted heap of debris, trapping the friends inside. Their screams echoed into the night, mingling with the ghostly laughter of the young girl. The carnival lights flickered one last time before going out, leaving the fairgrounds shrouded in darkness. And in the quiet that followed, the wind carried a haunting melody, a reminder of the carnival's dark secret and the souls it claimed. Until next time, friends, good night.